Hello and welcome everybody to another interview. Today we're going to be talking to Paul, who is the co-founder of Nexa. You can find them at Nexa Money on Twitter, and you can find them at nexa.org, and we'll get all of those links down in the description below. Super excited to have Nexa on, as they're one of the newer proof of work cryptocurrencies that has come about in this current bear market cycle, and they have a unique take on mining in particular and mining algorithms that I'm definitely going to get into. And they have recently experienced some great success on price here in the past 30 days, taking off quite quickly. I don't even know what the numbers are over the past 30 days. Paul, maybe you do have those. I was trying to get the actual percentage rise, but it was pretty crazy last I saw.
Right, yeah. Thanks for having me, Matthew. I'm always happy to talk about Nexa, of course, and just cryptocurrency in general.
Yeah, it's great having you.
Obsessed about it. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not massively interested in price. For me, that's not the most important thing, but obviously price does have an impact on like bringing more people in and getting some kind of excitement in the community and things like that. So from that side of things, it's obviously great. So yeah, we've had quite a big gain in the last few weeks, really. I think maybe like almost 10 times, something like that, in the last month. But again, I don't find that massively important. For me, it's more about, building out things that are actually useful for people, which, we've kind of got started on, but there's a hell of a lot more work to do, obviously.
Right. So, I mean, from the mining perspective, it's good to have a price that's going to put you in a position where your security layer is being compensated fairly, right? To where they can afford to do that. I think that's where price plays a part for sure. You don't want to be in a position where miners are having to take massive losses compared to their power bill, right? What do you think is the driver behind this recent price increase, though, of proof of work coins? This has been something that I've asked everybody here recently because it seems to be a trend, right? We kind of had that first spark with Caspa, and then it bounced to, I think, Y'all and Radiant, right? And then we started even seeing some of the older proof of work coins this week pump, right? We saw Ergo pop up. We saw even Ethereum Classic get a little gain. Do you think there's a driving force behind this?
It's a good question. You're definitely right. There, it seems like proof of work is kind of having a comeback, which is great, obviously. I mean, we have a philosophy in Nexa, or a lot of us that are working on Nexa have a kind of philosophy that with Bitcoin, a lot of the technology was kind of like the baby was thrown out with the bathwater in a way, that there was just so much useful technology there, and a lot of it got thrown out for EVM like chains and the proof of stake chains, whereas actually there's still a lot of usefulness in that, and that was kind of thrown away very quickly. And so you see things, I don't want to like bad mouth like other projects, because obviously everyone is doing great work in this industry, but you can see, let's say if I give one example, Solana has had it's obviously a proof of stake chain, has had many issues with keeping the chain running, or things being stopped, whereas proof of work chains, other than in rare occurrences of smaller chains, have always kept going, right? Like there's an enormous incentive to keep that chain with 100% uptime, and that's achieved by having this massive financial incentive to all these miners who have massive investment in actual physical infrastructure. They can't kind of flip-flop about that. They're really heavily invested. So even Nexa, there's obviously quite a new project, and I wouldn't call it like one of the top coins by maturity or price or anything like that yet, because we're new. But even so, we are expending a huge amount of money from the chain into securing it, because it's so important for the network. So having that money going out to the miners essentially gives that extra layer or level of security, which you're not going to get with proof of stake, in my opinion. And proof of stake is still is very much like an unproven technology.
Well, and it's really interesting.
Whereas proof of work is proven, So.
Yeah, we saw the statement from Hillary Clinton here most recently when she came out. She didn't say blockchain as a whole. She didn't say Ethereum. She said her worry was the fact that miners could buy equipment and generate an income in cryptocurrency from basically nothing, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. I mean, that is literally like essentially what she said, right? And it wasn't like she targeted Ethereum. And then you see the way that in the US, I know everybody that pays attention to crypto is across the entire, globe. I'm not saying that like US is the number one and we're talking about just their regulations, but the way they approach it does give some insight into how it's being looked at. And I think she's very correct in that, right? Whereas a proof of stake cryptocurrency, you have an inlet that has to be fiat, right? Because you have to take money and you have to transfer it into a proof of stake, which basically means you have to have this fiat inlet for proof of stake to function. Whereas proof of work, you don't have to have any fiat inlet or any one in particular. In fact, like by all means, for the most part, you can purchase any computer equipment with cryptocurrency that you want off of Newegg, right? Or you can purchase an ASIC off of whatever platform with cryptocurrency. You don't have to have that fiat inlet, which means, of course, the concern there from Hillary's point of view was that it destabilizes the dollar. Not that there's other things also destabilizing it like bricks or whatever. But I thought that was an interesting take. And I was like, oh, okay, I get where the fear is coming from there, right? And but the great benefit in this transformation we're going through, this digital transformation we're going through, as we move into cryptocurrency or really just blockchain in general, right? Because I think at the end of the day with CBDCs and everything, this is the direction we're headed. So I think it's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, I mean, thank you, Hillary Clinton, for putting such a great advert of cryptocurrency.
Right.
Like that's a perfect description.
She's like, we can't do anything about this. And you're like, yeah, you can't. There's nothing you can do about it, right? It's exactly. Like as soon as you try to get rid of it, another one pops up. Like you equate it to peer-to-peer networks, right? Like you shut down a BitTorrent, or whatever it is, you just have another one pop up, a uTorrent or whatever it is. You shut down Pirate Bay just pops up somewhere else. And because there's peer-to-peer everywhere, you're never going to get rid of it. And you can make a few examples here and there of individuals, right? You can be like, this guy bad or whatever. But at the end of the day, I equate it to like trying, I equate it to the war on drugs. Like it's pointless, right? You're never going to win that war.
Right, because it's an anti-fragile system with massive incentives to keep it going. And the more people that get involved, the more incentive it is for every participant to actually, defend it. Which is why, I've said multiple times that, decentralization is obviously extremely important in cryptocurrencies, and mostly that gets focused on, making sure miners are decentralized, which is obviously is very important. But in my opinion, one of the most powerful types of decentralization is getting as many people involved in cryptocurrency as possible. Because let's say when half the world has owned some cryptocurrency, it becomes much more difficult for politicians to try and kill it or restrict it in some way, because everyone's invested in making sure it's as useful as possible. You
can't police 7 billion people effectively. You just can't, right? You can't do that.
You can try, but yeah, you're not going to be very successful.
Right. So let's talk about Nexa a little bit. We got basically coming off the tail of Bitcoin Cash, right? Or specifically Bitcoin Unlimited, that project, right? And forking off of that and then implementing, from what I understand, a modified version of ProgPal, which is called Nexa Proof of Work, which I definitely want to get into. Stop me at any point if I'm getting this incorrect. But what was the choice?
I would say that, so just so people aren't confused, Bitcoin Unlimited is not like a cryptocurrency, it's an organization, like a software, blockchain software organization. And Nexa is not a chain fork from Bitcoin Cash. It has its own Genesis block. The code that launched Nexa is developed by Bitcoin Unlimited. And yes, a lot of the software was Bitcoin Unlimited software on Bitcoin Cash. But even before that, before Bitcoin Cash even existed, it was their full node software for Bitcoin. So Bitcoin Unlimited is a very old organization in cryptocurrency terms right now. And the code actually comes all the way back from 2015 for a Bitcoin BTC full node.
So that's, this is a great learning time too. What was the decision to go that route as opposed to either building from ground up or forking from a different chain or a different code, utilizing a different code base? What was the decision to go this route?
Sure. So, so Bitcoin Unlimited's code base is a very long way now from Bitcoin when it was forked. The actual code was forked in 2015. So there's been a lot of upgrades since then. And there's a lot of history there as well. We're definitely not going to have time to get into that. But so it's not that, Bitcoin Unlimited just forked Bitcoin Cash's code and this completely new project. It was Bitcoin Unlimited's code from running the Bitcoin Cash network. And Bitcoin Cash has multiple nodes, so it makes sense for them to work on a code base that they're very familiar with because it's their own, right? So this is, I guess, an important point about why Nexa was launched. So, Bitcoin Unlimited was part of the group of projects and people that founded Bitcoin Cash due to Bitcoin BTC not scaling, right? This was like a big argument.
Right, I remember.
I'm sure you know about.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So there was this big scaling debate and argument, and it got very nasty at times. And in the end, the kind of BTC community split, with one side thinking that the capacity needs to grow, and the other thinking, well, it's not possible right now because that will cause minor centralization, which to some degree is a legitimate argument. But this is why Bitcoin Unlimited developed a lot of technology to allow to get past that roadblock, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this went into Bitcoin Cash, and there was a lot of technology that Bitcoin Unlimited had developed for scaling and other things that ended up not being put into Bitcoin Cash, and the decision was made, okay, let's launch a new cryptocurrency where everything, all these different new functions and capabilities can be put into one chain, and we don't have to worry about trying to go through actually a very difficult and messy consensus process, which is there for good reasons, but it slows things down, right? And we feel that crypto is not at a point where it's fully succeeded, right? I mean, kind of clearly, because everyone in the world is not using cryptocurrency. So the final idea of how cryptocurrency can be useful for the whole world has not been found yet, and therefore we need to be able to iterate quickly. We need to be able to come up with new solutions, try them out. And so that was the reason that Nexa was founded, was so that BU and hopefully more and more people who get involved can build out lots of new functions that don't exist on other cryptocurrencies. So to kind of go into like maybe the details of what makes Nexa a bit different from other cryptos. So it's a UTXO based chain, which again is kind of gone out of fashion in a way. Now most chains are kind of EVM based for the it brings a lot of utility that a developer can make basically any program, which makes sense, but it comes with significant scalability issues, which is why Ethereum handle like 14 transactions per second, something like that, is because each transaction has to be processed in sequence, sequentially, and can't be processed in parallel. We can go into that a bit if you want, but it's the truth. And so, but UTXO-based blockchains do not have that issue. Each transaction is kind of like a little packet where it contains all the information needed to validate it. Mm-hmm. And so by keeping this system, the UTXO-based system, it means that we can scale to many, many orders of magnitude higher transaction throughput than is possible on an EVM chain. And so secondary to that, so that kind of, without going into details, that solves scalability. And we can talk about how exactly it solves that a bit later. But the other important point is like, well, it has to be useful as well, right? Like this is why Ethereum, in my opinion, has got so many people building on it, is that it's really useful to build valuable products and services. So what we want to do is be able to offer something very similar in terms of capabilities, but using the UTXO based model. So as far as I'm aware, there is no other chain that's trying to achieve this using UTXOs. There are obviously other chains like BCH that you can use. You can create smart contracts on UTXOs. We want to go a lot further than that, having like the key in my opinion is multi UTXO smart contract architecture. So you actually make much more complex programmability by like linking multiple UTXOs together, and that gets us to something that's much closer to EVM like capability, but without the scalability trade-off that's being made.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of like a summary of what Nexa stand out from other cryptocurrencies.
Perfect. Thanks for all that information. This is a proof of work channel, so everybody's going to be interested in, of course, the mining algorithm. Now, Nexa proof of work isn't really straight up a ProgPal. From what I can tell, it's been modified a little bit. Could you talk a little bit about some of those modifications that were made, especially from the power perspective? It seems to be lower. It also seems to perform better on newer GPU hardware than older GPU hardware as well.
Sure. So the goal, so this is where, again, like Nexa kind of stands out here. The goal with the proof of work algorithm is to make it so that, okay, maybe I rewind a little bit and explain from an earlier point in that. So the goal with Nexa is to scale to, let's say, a minimum 100,000 transactions per second. And the reason why you can't do that normally on a blockchain is because once you start getting to much, much higher capacity or much, much higher throughput, there are bottlenecks in compute, like how quickly can the node actually process and validate transactions. And then on storage, how do you actually store that much data? And then on bandwidth, how do you send that much data between the different nodes? And so if you just try to do that on Bitcoin right now, it wouldn't work because the number of orphans would increase with how the throughput essentially, and so it would just destabilize the network and cause massive miner centralization. So one of the ways that Bitcoin Unlimited has solved this is using a technology called graphene. Essentially, it compresses the amount of data needed to be sent to publish a block around the network to a tiny, tiny fraction of what it would normally be. And that's because each block contains, it's basically the same information that the nodes already have, almost entirely. It's just the list of transactions, which they have because it's in the mempool, and then a tiny like block header. And the block header is like 80 bytes or maybe slightly more than that, but it's a tiny amount of data. And so if you can communicate what the difference is between the mempool and the transaction list that's in the block, then, and you can do that efficiently, then that is actually the best way to do it. And that's what graphene does, essentially. It's like this above my head, how it achieves that. It's very like, some very clever researchers worked out how to do that. I like recommend going and looking into it. It's very like interesting technology. So that covers like the issue of orphans caused by the size of blocks, right? So you can, the size of blocks therefore becomes not an issue, mostly. And then the second issue is storage. This has not been like solved yet, or let's say we know how to build the solution, it just hasn't been implemented on the network. And so the next thing is UTXO-based UTXO commitments. So instead of having to store the whole blockchain, and like if you want to join a network, you have to download the entire blockchain, validate it all, and then you can start from there. So Nexa wants to get rid of this problem by making it so that miners only need to have the UTXO set, so the list of all current kind of outstanding balances, and not the whole blockchain, which is a much smaller quantity of data, especially the longer the blockchain has existed. And then and another part of that is the hardware to actually process these UTXOs. We're actually building a piece of hardware called Cache Drive. The name may change on that, which stores and then allows a CPU or device to access that UTXO set incredibly quickly. So yeah, that's kind of the key to a lot of these solutions, is creating a piece of hardware that will become cheap enough that any node, like economic node, can afford it. And then once these nodes have this hardware, then they can process very, very high numbers of transactions.
That could be a huge problem, though, right? As far as like having proprietary hardware for blockchain.
Yeah, but it won't be proprietary. So that's
okay.
Bitcoin. What Bitcoin Unlimited is working on is an open hardware system that anyone can buy or build. And the proof of works, this is kind of getting back to what the original question was about proof of work, which is that the proof of work will actually incentivize the creation and increasing ability of this hardware, because the proof of work algorithm requires that miners do these things, which is like look up the UTXO set, process signatures, so validate signatures, so that over time, with increased, how would you put it, increased reward, there's more and more money to be made by making this algorithm more and more efficient. Same as Bitcoin. Like, you know, you can look at SHA-256. It's increased in efficiency like 10 billion times, I think, when BTC was launched to today. And so the same kind of incentive system should take this hardware from, you know, initially expensive and hard to build to very, very cheap commodity that it will just be a chip essentially that you can plug into your computer via like a PCI Express port or M2 port or something like that, maybe even USB port.
But I mean, even if you have it as open as possible, you still run into those same issues. Like, let's say with what we see in the FPGA market, right? Where you kind of have these entities that close off access to consumers, right? Either at the hardware level or at the software level as well. In FPGA, for example, you got blocks on both sides, right? And you end up with these kind of almost proof of work schemes that end up happening where they mine a bunch of the coin and then dump the coin and the hardware on end users, and it can be problems. So I like, even if it's open, I still say like, it seems like that's going to be an interesting problem to solve.
Definitely, but what I'd say is the amount of speed up required to do the compute side of the scaling bottlenecks is not actually that much than what will be initially possible to do, even like on the hardware that Bitcoin Unlimited is producing. Okay. So, you know, you don't need 1 trillion transactions per second or something, for example. You know, you only need a certain number to cover the capacity for the world.
Would there not be like a software solution for current like NVMe hardware by any chance, or something along those lines?
Okay, so yeah, one thing we are actually looking at the moment is initially implementing it in the GPU, because obviously a GPU is far more accessible than like an FPGA and then an ASIC eventually. So yeah, like, you know, you can easily get a virtualized you know, GPU server and then run it on there. So and it allows more flexibility because the proof of work algorithm is not finished. There's more things to be added to it, and so and the same with the full node software. We want to add more opcodes, like more scripting capability over time. That's kind of difficult to do if the full node is in an ASIC, right? If the virtual machine becomes a machine, then it's much more difficult to update.
Which we do have to talk about, because the end goal here is Nexa wasn't developed to be like ASIC or FPGA resistant, right? And there is this kind of roadmap to move into blinded proof of work, if I understand, as well, which is going to change some things around too. So it sounds like this all wraps up into the same thing. So my understanding is Nexa will eventually, or you're open to ASICs right now. ASICs would probably come after the hard fork to blinded proof of work, though, is my understanding.
Yeah, so there's quite a few things still to add to the proof of work, the newer proof of work algorithm. It may come in multiple updates. That's not certain yet. So yeah, there's the UTXO commitments requirement that will go in. UTXO lookups, so that the miners actually have to check the UTXO set as part of the proof of work algorithm, and then another part of the signature verification, and yeah, maybe a couple of other things. But yeah, the blind. Sorry, I forgot what it's called here. The blind. The thing you stated earlier.
Blinded proof of work.
That's it, blinded proof of work. So as far as I'm aware, the goal with that is to stop validationless mining, right? Which has been a problem for BTC in the past. And the goal with this is, yeah, that it makes every miner actually validate all the transactions in a block rather than blindly signing them.
I forgot the term. I was just talking about that with David too from Raptorium earlier. I should have wrote it down. I didn't write it down. I got to get better at note taking. But there was, I forgot, there was a term that he utilized for that, right? Because you have essentially, that can help speed up the access to whatever that asset is to the receiving wallet, right?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but
I got to remember. But I apologize. My head wanted to go there and I couldn't get there.
Is this the like instant transaction technology that you were talking about? Okay.
Yes.
So there's a couple of things right now where it improves the security of instant transactions, essentially zero comp transactions. So there's double spend proofs, which if someone sends a double spend on the network, nodes will not forward the double spend on, because it will know there's already a kind of competing transaction on the network. But if they do that, then that actually stops, it doesn't notify the network that this is happening. So instead, it provides a signed proof that there is a double spend, and then forwards that on, so that it becomes an alert. Essentially, it becomes an alert across the network that a double spend is happening. It's not a perfect security, so you're not going to want to use this for like a large transaction or something. Like an exchange wouldn't use this, and because statistically you could still win over time. So this is more for like, you know, maybe a point of sale device or something like that to increase the security there. So, you know, it's the instant transaction thing is a difficult one to solve, but you can kind of solve part of it in the real world by having things like double spend proofs. But you actually can solve it perfectly within, you know, some requirements with a technology actually my software company is developing. And I can't talk about exactly how it works right now, because we want to make sure we've got actually like a working system out there before we do that. But it does work. The prototype is working already, and it allows you to send a transaction and the receiver know instantaneously by cryptographic proofs on the network that a double spend will not happen.
Okay.
So there's similar technologies already out there, but they're from a user interface perspective, they're kind of not ideal in my opinion. Whereas this one will require, it will just look like a toggle button on a wallet. So they can just turn it on, they'll pay an extra small fee and know that it will be credited instantaneously, even on like an exchange. So yeah, I would like to talk about that more, but there will be more information coming out about it later in the year.
So as far as blinded proof of work goes, do you have a current timeline on that for the roadmap?
This year, I believe.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think we have a more specific timeline than that.
And
that's something that Andrew Stone is working on.
And then a really interesting part about this that I'm curious about is it does mention working specifically with or forcing the ASIC designers to implement I guess part of this technology, right? The best way to explain that for the, I guess, the Schnorr signature verification. Do you think that that poses a potential optics issue with miners that are currently in there if you have the coin itself directly working with the ASIC manufacturer? Or do you think this is more like from the perspective of like NVIDIA forcing third parties to meet certain requirements?
That's an interesting question. I mean, so if Bitcoin Unlimited produces its own ASIC, the goal will be to produce it for full nodes to be able to process a very high throughput of transactions, right? I don't think the goal of it will be to produce an actual mining node, although we'll see. Like, I think it's kind of open discussion at the moment. And again, I think it would be produced in an open source way, as opposed to closing it off to make, you know, some large sum of money of being the only ones that are in a kind of privileged position to do so. So yeah, I think it's a reasonable question. Like, you wouldn't want someone a group that are in a kind of privileged position to exploit that, essentially.
Right.
So I think it would have to be done in a way that it benefits the whole network, and it doesn't harm the network.
And so that'll come down through Bitcoin Unlimited into Nexa. Is that my understanding?
I mean, maybe that's the thing. It's a permissionless system, so
right.
Who knows? Maybe someone is building an ASIC right now. I mean, it would probably be not the best idea because the proof of work algo is changing.
Yeah.
But once that is changed, you know, maybe someone will be working in the background and right. So
yeah,
we'll see.
It's always interesting to take a look at this now. So when taking into consideration I guess the end goal, which is moving over to ASICs and stuff, was that taken into consideration for emissions, and what strategies are utilized for emissions to compensate for that?
So the goal with going to ASICs is simply to produce commodity hardware that can provide nodes with a very high throughput without causing miner centralization. Mm-hmm. So that's the primary goal of it. It's not that there's a kind of economic goal with moving to ASICs. In fact, there's no, like, we're not trying to get to ASICs right now. We're letting the network naturally move to that point, which I assume will come with, you know, price growth or value of the network and the amount of rewards and things like that. So the goal is not with the mining hardware, the goal is not on the economic side of things, it's on the capacity for the network side of things.
Right.
So yeah, I guess we'll see. One thing we are definitely planning to do, or the Bitcoin Unlimited is planning to do, is make sure that everyone is kind of very aware of the algorithm updates ahead of time, so that it's not, we don't want the GPU miners to suddenly like fall off a cliff one day. Everyone should kind of know, okay, this is happening at this date, and to prepare for it.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Which is, I do want to go back to that. Bitcoin Unlimited didn't utilize a ProgPow initially. So why did Nexa decide to go with a modification of ProgPow?
So I don't know what ProgPow is. I'm not like a mining kind of expert.
Because I thought it was ProgPow, unless I'm completely off. I was trying to look at that actually. Maybe I need to.
The algorithm is simply SHA-256 in combination with forcing the miners to process signature validations, validate signatures.
Okay.
So it just does Schnorr signature validation. A number of them. I think you have to do 5 signatures, something like that. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But yeah, so it's actually good information for us, because we can see even like a single high-end GPU can already do 220 million signature verifications per second.
Yeah, I think I need to do a little bit more research and understand how this is working. Maybe I did get that mixed up. There's a lot going on these days. Get some projects
There's
mixed
a lot
up.
of different cryptocurrencies and
Yeah. So, okay. So we're shifting from that. I did want to talk about crowdfunding and the 2023 plan. Now, Nexa was a fair launch with no VC funding or team allocation. There was no pre-mine, no dev tax. And so you guys have recently, kind of proposed some crowdfunding to take care of this, and you have some goals and achievements that you had initially put out that I think there's being some adjustment on, as far as I understand. So what was the reasoning behind that adjustment, and what are the plans to get that, I guess, funded?
Yeah, so you're right. We're all kind of old school Bitcoin people, and we feel that any kind of real cryptocurrency, one that wants to be kind of a decentralized system for the whole world, should fair launch. Although I do get the economic incentives for taking some percentage of the coins and distributing them to the team that are working on it, or whatever it needs to be used for. But we believe that it's actually more important to do it in a fair way, so that no one gets a privileged position. But yeah, that comes with certain issues, right? Because you don't have the same money necessarily to compete with other much larger projects that did pay themselves out of the network. So the crowdfunding campaign, the goal is to provide extra funds for this year and for the future, for various marketing activities, to build the community, support the community, get awareness out about Nexa. And so the main reason for the changes was basically we were working behind the scenes to get guarantees from certain larger investors that we can guarantee an exchange listing if we reach a certain goal level. And the goal is 10 billion next, and a set of us have agreed to make sure that we fund like a fairly large size exchange, because we feel that's a good stepping stone. Like we recently launched on MEXC about a month and a bit ago, and we feel that it's actually good to have at least kind of 2 major exchanges that are open to United States, US customers as well. So
okay, cool. Awesome. So wrapping things up, where can people find you? Where can they find more information about Nexa? I know we covered it at the beginning, but just a reminder for everybody.
Sure. So the main website is nexa.org. You can get if you're a developer, you can get the specification from spec.nexa.org. What we really encourage is people to come join the community. You can get that on Telegram with t.me/NexaCoin. And then on Discord, you can just go to discord.gg/Nexa. That's pretty simple.
Check the description for all of those things. Is there anything we missed about Nexa that is important that we should cover that you can think of?
Yeah, so I think people really need to not underestimate kind of the UTXO side of things. We covered it a little bit, but I feel,
right,
and many of us feel, that with Bitcoin, the baby really was thrown out with the bathwater. There's so much incredible technology there,
But isn't
and
there a
it was
lot
kind of underutilized?
There's a lot of projects working on this kind of like going the route of UTXO, right? There's Ergo. I think Raptorium's implementing it. So what is Nexa doing different that sets it apart from the UTXO perspective?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of, I mean, I can't, there's so many different cryptocurrencies, so obviously I can't compare to every single one. And I think, again, this goes back to the proof of work thing, that people are starting to realize that actually there is a lot of value in the UTXO based systems and proof of work based systems. And so, this is becoming a more popular thing again. With UTXO, it's obviously what Bitcoin Unlimited has most experience in. They've been developing in the space for a long time, working on UTXO systems. But I think the main unique thing that we're going to see over the next year is these much more complex multi-UTXO based systems. One thing that Nexa already does different from most other UTXO chains is that the smart contracting language is much more generalized. Whereas, like if you take Bitcoin, for example, there's only a couple or a few different types of transaction, because the focus is to just be a transaction, a payment from one person to another or to a few people. Whereas Nexa is really trying to be a virtual machine where you can actually do much more interesting financial, not necessarily just transactions, but financial, create financial systems and tools and products and services. Having this more generalized transaction format, and then later on building up a system of multi-UTXO based smart contracts, I think it's not really out there yet. Most of them still focus on creating a lot of complexity in a single transaction, which can only go so far on UTXOs. So, I mean, I think that's the unique thing, and plus obviously the scalability. And we'll start to see the scaling proven later this year when we actually implement very large throughput on a testnet network, where we show, if you put these technologies into one system, distribute it across a network of nodes, that it will really handle this level of throughput.
Cool. Awesome, Paul. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for explaining Nexa to us. I'm a lot more educated. Hopefully everybody else learned something, and we'll see you guys next Tuesday.
Thank you, Matthew.
Today's sponsor is myself. I recently launched a crypto mining e-course at sonofatech.com, and it includes 9 steps to cover when you decide to start your crypto mining journey. This is specifically pertaining to 2023 crypto mining profits and taking advantage of the down market to achieve skyrocketing growth as we move into the next halving of Bitcoin. You'll learn buying mining equipment in a bear market, using outside investment to speculative mine, begin mining once profit is established, sell mine crypto to pay for electricity, hold and prep for the bull run, sell at the top of the bull market, sell mining equipment at the top of the bull market, and begin investing in land and power so that you can bring in outside investors to utilize excess resources. Thanks everybody for your support, and I hope you enjoy the course. Let me know what you think of it in the comment section below.